He may even identify himself with it and believe that he is what he appears to be.
Welcome to the NCE Study Guide.
Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, it's great to have you here because we are diving straight into the deep end today. We have a lot of ground to cover, and honestly, looking at the stack of notes we've built together, this is one of those topics that feels a little philosophical at first, but it is absolutely critical for the exam.
Oh, completely. It's the foundation of everything else on the test.
Right. So today we're announcing the specific title of this session, which is Module 3. Know your lane scope of practice and professional identity on the NCE.
Know your lane. I actually really like that phrase. It sounds so simple, but as anyone who has taken a practice exam knows, the NCE has a way of making knowing your lane feel surprisingly complicated.
Oh, totally. It's the section where you read a question and think, well, I could technically do that. But the real question the test is asking is, should I?
Exactly. And if we look back at where we've been, Module 1 was really asking, can you think ethically? And then Module 2 was asking, can you protect confidentiality? Now Module 3 is asking something even more foundational, which is, do you actually understand who you are as a professional counselor?
It sounds kind of existential, right? Like, who am I? But for everyone listening, we know you are deep in the weeds of studying right now. You're memorizing theories, you're looking at stats, but I want to pause and say this section, which covers professional identity, scope of practice, and all that credentialing alphabet soup, it's huge. It aligns directly with sections 1.1.11 through 1.1.1 seen in your NCE outline.
And the NCE loves this section. They love it because it tests whether you understand the counseling profession itself. It's not just about clinical technique. It's about understanding the specific philosophical ground you are standing on. Because a lot of students walk in thinking, well, I'm basically a therapist, so I'll just answer like a psychologist.
And if you do that on this section, you will miss questions.
You absolutely will miss questions. It's a guaranteed way to lose points.
So that is the mission of this deep dive today. We need to strip away the generic idea of just, helping people and define exactly what a counselor is in the eyes of the National Board for Certified Counselors.
We are going to cover the evolution of that identity, the critical difference between what you can do versus what you should do, and then that administrative gauntlet of licensure, certification, and gatekeeping.
But before we unpack all of that, I want to give a really quick shout out to our listeners. If you are finding these deep dives helpful, please take a second to rate the show 5 stars. It really, truly helps us get these study guides to more students. And if you want the full library, I'm talking all the study modules, the meditations, the stuff that really locks this info into your brain, head over to our Patreon.
Yeah, it's a fantastic resource. Knowledge is most valuable when you can access it systematically, and that Patreon library is designed to do exactly that, covering the entire spectrum of the NCE core competencies.
Okay, so let's get into the time machine. Because to know who we are, we have to know where we came from. We're talking about the evolution of professional identity. Who actually started this whole party?
Well, if we are looking at the father of the movement, we have to go back to the early 1900s and look at Frank Parsons.
Ah, the vocational guidance guy.
Precisely. And that origin story is important because it sets the trajectory for the entire field. We didn't start as doctors treating illness in a hospital. We started as guides, helping people find their path in life, specifically their careers initially. So over the last century, counseling has had to work very hard to differentiate itself from psychology and social work.
Which is a key point for the exam, right? I feel like I've seen practice questions where the answer literally hinges on knowing that a counselor isn't just a mini psychologist.
That is the exact aha moment. Counselors are not junior psychiatrists. We aren't mini psychologists. The profession stands on its own distinct philosophical foundation. And there are specific pillars that define that identity for the test.
Lay them on us. What makes the counseling model different from the medical model?
It really comes down to 5 core things. First, wellness and prevention versus pathology. We look for health, not just sickness. Second, development across the lifespan. We view problems as natural life stages or transitions, not just broken brains. Third is multicultural competence. Fourth, strengths-based approaches. And fifth, client empowerment.
Okay, so let's paint a picture here for the listener. If I'm sitting in the exam center staring at a question about a client with severe anxiety, and one of the answers describes the client strictly in terms of their disease or their pathology.
It is likely a trap. Unless the question is specifically asking about a DSM diagnosis, the NCE strongly favors answers that embrace that holistic developmental model. If you pick the answer that sounds like a psychiatrist wrote it, focusing only on the disease, you're likely missing the heart of the counseling identity.
That is such a good tip. It's like, when in doubt, choose the answer that sounds like it empowers the client rather than just fixing them.
Precisely. You are looking for the answer that identifies coping strengths, normalizes developmental transitions, and builds on what's working.
Okay, let's move to the topic that I think causes the absolute most headaches for students. The battle between scope of practice and scope of competence.
Yes. These two terms get used interchangeably in casual conversation all the time, but on the exam, they are night and day.
So let's break it down. What is the actual difference?
Think of scope of practice as your legal lane. This is defined by state licensure laws. It's what the profession is allowed to do generally. For example, in your state, can a licensed professional counselor provide psychotherapy? Yes. Can they diagnose mental disorders? Usually yes, depending on the state. Can they conduct assessments? Yes. That is the broad legal container.
Okay, so scope of practice is what the state says I legally can do because I had the license on my wall. So what is scope of competence?
Scope of competence is your personal lane. It is what you, specifically, are trained and qualified to do. Just because your license says you can do therapy doesn't mean you are competent to do every single type of therapy out there.
Right, the classic example here is EMDR, right? Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
That is the perfect example. Let's say you are fully licensed. Your scope of practice says you can provide psychotherapy. EMDR is a type of psychotherapy. So legally, you are in the clear.
But say I have never taken an actual EMDR training course. I just watched a really good YouTube video about it over the weekend.
Then you have zero scope of competence. If you try to do EMDR with a client, you are operating within your scope of practice.
But way outside your scope of competence.
Exactly. And that is an ethical violation and potentially malpractice. You are legally clear, but ethically, you are in the danger zone. The board will absolutely come after your license for that.
I feel like this leads to a very specific type of NCE question. The one that asks, what should you do if you lack experience with a client's specific issue?
Yes, the what should you do pattern. And there's a strict hierarchy of correct answers here. If you lack competence, the answer is never figure it out independently or read a book and try your best.
So fake it till you make it is not an NCE-approved strategy.
Definitely not. The correct answers almost always involve seeking supervision, obtaining specific formal training, or referring the client out to someone who is already competent.
Let's look at a scenario we see a lot, because I think this really drives it home. Imagine a counselor takes a weekend workshop, maybe a 2-day seminar, and then starts advertising themselves online as a neuropsychological specialist.
Oh, this is a red flag parade.
Right. It sounds impressive on a business card, but why exactly is this wrong in the eyes of the NCE?
Well, let's dissect it. First, a weekend workshop does not make you a specialist in neuropsychology. That takes years of doctoral level training. So you are operating outside your scope of competence. Second, you are misrepresenting your credentials, which violates truth and advertising rules in the Code of Ethics.
So if a question like that pops up, the NCE is looking for us to identify the violation. They want to see accurate representation of what we actually know.
Correct. They want to see that you know your limits. The exam isn't testing if you know how to do complex neuropsych testing. It's testing if you know when you shouldn't be doing it.
That's a great way to put it. It's about recognizing your own boundaries.
You know, there is a phrase we saw in the notes that I think perfectly captures this. Boundary overreach disguised as ambition.
Wow, that is a killer phrase. Boundary overreach disguised as ambition.
It happens all the time in the real world. Counselors want to be the hero. They want to be the expert who can fix everything. So they overextend. The NCE rewards the counselor who is humble enough to say, I can't do that safely, and refers the client out.
Okay, shifting gears. We have to talk about the big three. This is the part of the study guide where eyes usually glaze over licensure, certification, and accreditation.
It can be dry, I know, but I have a trick for this. You have to visualize the hierarchy because the exam will constantly mix these terms up just to confuse you.
Okay, walk us through the trick. How do we keep them straight?
It's basically a matching game. You have three entities, the state, the NBCC, and case syrup. You need to match them to their function. Number one, states license individuals. That is your legal permission to practice, like your LPC or LMHC. Number two, the NBCC certifies individuals. That is a professional credential, like the NCC. It's voluntary, but it shows you met a high national standard. And number 3, case rep accredits programs. They don't look at individual people, they look at universities and educational programs.
Okay, I'm going to repeat that because it's such high-yield information. States license people. NBCC certifies people. Case rep accredits schools.
If you can just keep that straight, you will instantly eliminate half the wrong answers on these administrative questions.
Speaking of administrative stuff, let's talk about the alphabet soup of organizations. We've got ACA, NBCC, AMHCA. Sometimes it feels like they're just throwing random letters at us to see what sticks.
It really does, but they each have a distinct personality or role in the profession.
So how do we distinguish them on a multiple-choice test?
The ACA, the American Counseling Association, is the mothership. Think of them as the home for professional membership, ethics, and advocacy. If a question is about the code of ethics or lobbying for the profession in Congress, think ACA.
And the MBCC.
The NDCC is the gatekeeper of the test. They administer the NCE, they handle certification. If the question is about the exam itself or the NCC credential, think NBCC.
And AMHCA.
That's the American Mental Health Counselors Association. They are specific to clinical mental health counselors. But really, the big distinction the NCE wants you to know is between the ACA, which is ethics and membership, and NBCC, which is testing and certification.
Got it. So ACA is the heart of the profession, and NBCC is the clipboard.
That is a very useful analogy. I might actually steal that.
Now, I want to move to something that I think surprises people about the profession. We aren't just clinicians sitting in a chair nodding and asking how things make people feel. We are also advocates.
This is crucial. The NCE views the counselor's job as systemic. We don't just treat the person in a vacuum. We look at the environment they live in.
So what does advocacy actually look like on the exam?
It looks like promoting client welfare beyond the therapy room. It means addressing systemic barriers like poverty, discrimination, or lack of access to care. If an answer choice involves helping a client navigate a difficult legal system or fighting for educational equity for a student, that is often the correct counseling answer.
It's about removing obstacles out in the real world, not just teaching people how to cope with those obstacles internally.
Exactly. It's not extra work. It is core counseling work.
Now, the flip side of advocacy is gatekeeping. This sounds a little intense. Gatekeeping. It sounds like we are guarding a medieval fortress.
In a way, we are. Gatekeeping is about protecting the profession and, more importantly, protecting the public. It involves evaluating whether a trainee or a colleague is actually fit to be a counselor.
This brings up the impaired colleague scenario. This is a classic exam setup. You have a colleague or a supervisee who is burning out, maybe showing up late to sessions, maybe smelling like alcohol, or just making consistently bad clinical calls. They are harming clients. What do you do?
This is a high-pressure question because our instinct as humans is often to avoid conflict, ignore it, or cover for our friends. But the NCE is asking, can you make the hard ethical call?
So do you call the state board and report them immediately?
Usually, the ethical steps follow a strict sequence. Unless there is immediate, grievous harm happening right now, the first step is almost always a direct discussion with the person.
You have to actually talk to them face to face.
You do. You say, I've noticed you're struggling, or I smelled alcohol. Then you document that conversation thoroughly. If it's a supervisee, you create a remediation plan, which is a formal way for them to get back on track. Formal reporting to the board is usually the final step if they refuse to change or if the harm is severe and ongoing. But the key takeaway is you address it. You never, ever look the other way.
That makes total sense. It's about prioritizing client welfare over your own uncomfortable conversations. Silence is essentially complicity.
Always. You are protecting the public first and foremost.
Okay, we've covered history, scope of practice, the alphabet soup, and gatekeeping. Before we wrap up, let's talk strategy. If I'm studying Module 3 this week, what should be my tactical approach to the material?
First, know your definitions precisely. Don't guess on what accreditation means. Know for a fact it matches with case rep. Second, when in doubt, default to supervision. If a question puts you in a gray area, the answer involving consult with a supervisor is almost never wrong. And third, always choose client welfare over your own ego or financial interest.
I love that second point, the supervision defaults, like the safety net of the exam.
It really is. It shows the examiners you know you aren't an island and you value collaboration.
Which brings us to the deeper meaning of all this. Why does the exam care so much about this module? Why isn't it just asking us about cognitive behavioral therapy techniques all day?
Because this isn't just regulatory trivia. It is identity formation. The exam is asking, do you respect limits? Do you value collaboration? A strong counselor knows what they can do, but they also know very clearly what they cannot do.
I love that. It's about professional humility.
It is. If ethics is the compass and confidentiality is the shield, then professional identity is the map. It tells you where you are standing and where you are going. The NCE rewards those who stay in their lane.
Professional identity is the map. That is definitely going on a sticky note on my mirror. So here is a provocative thought to leave you with as you study this week.
Yeah.
We spend so much time trying to prove what we know right, but are you ready to admit what you don't know? Because that might just be the mark of a truly strong counselor.
And that willingness to admit what we don't know is actually the best protection against burnout and ethical violations. It is a massive strength, not a weakness.
Absolutely. Well, listeners, that wraps up Module 3. But don't get too comfortable, because in Module 4, we are tackling one of those anxiety-provoking topics out there: boundaries. Dual relationships, the very fine line between crossing a boundary and violating one.
The slippery slope. It is incredibly nuanced, and it is everywhere on the exam.
You definitely do not want to miss that. Before you go, please remember to give us that 5-star rating on whatever app you're listening on. It takes 2 seconds and helps us out a ton. And if you are ready to get serious about your prep, join us on Patreon to unlock the full library of study modules and meditations for all the NCE core competencies.
Good luck with your studying this week. You can absolutely do this.
See you next time on The Deep Dive.
1, 2, 3.
Nice to be in orbit.